welcome back to the MICK Show, man. We have a guest this week who I had the privilege of being on his podcast a year or two ago, and it was a much better setup than this bullshit I'm putting you through using like AirPods and like a USB mic. Because we went to your studio in LA, and it was just this most luxurious. Like drinks were flowing. It was an amazing experience, Marty.
Those were my employees. Like you can't call or the people who worked with me. You know, like you can't. Yeah. So I work with women mostly because I just find them to be the most collaborative. Like sometimes when you work with men, they don't really seem to be as collaborative. I also think it's partly because I spent my life working with men in a locker room. You know, like I don't want to be around men no more.
No, that's true. I know. I kind of made it sound like it was like the I Get Around video.
You made it seem like it was big pimping. You know what I'm saying? Like,
like we're in the tub, we're in the jacuzzi. But you know, whatever though, it's all good.
That shit's funny.
So. I mean, that is an interesting duality, though, because that's kind of what I think is fascinating about your career is that you're a man who's done two different things, and that like the most testosterone driven Americana sport of football. And then you now do these beautiful, cultural, lovely, astonishing children's creative projects and all sorts of other things. And how does that duality exist in your mind?
It's an interesting duality, not for me, but for others, right? Because this is always who I've been. Like I've always made things and I always played sports. And I try to get people to understand that sports were always like secondary for me as a being, right? Like I just played sports. Like someone had to teach me sports. No one taught me art. Like it seems like such a juxtaposition to be someone who, you know, literally physically manhandles things with their hands, right? Like I'm punching, I'm slapping, and, you know, I'm catching the ball, stiff arming, throwing people around, slamming people to the ground. But then these same hands are trying to make beautiful things, right? Like whether it's pottery or whether it's, you know, art pieces, colorful worlds. And it's just like these hands have done lots of things. But like, to me, there is this duality of trying to like exist because I don't really belong anywhere. The sporting world, I didn't fit in, right? Just because of my mindset, what I was about, what I was interested in or whatever. But then also in the art world, I don't really fit in because of my personality, my traits and things that came from me in the sporting world. So like I usually end up being in the space all alone because like I can relate to people, but people can't relate to me. I wouldn't say that the art world has accepted me as like the way I would have thought it was with the work that I put out, my body of work and just my consistency in my work. And the same thing with football. I don't really think I was ever really accepted.
I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, probably your secret sauce though for why you've been able to like excel at both. Do you remember as a kid, the first time you felt creative?
I can't remember a time when I didn't feel creative. As a kid, like I was always making something or thinking about making something. Like it's just who I am. So I can't remember a time where I felt like I wasn't creative. Like I'm the guy that if we play, like if something happened, like say we're friends as kids and something happened and somebody was telling a story, they'd be like, man, shut up. Let Marty tell the story, right? Like, you know, because I was that guy. So I'm like, yo, it was like such and such. Like I was always like a griot, you know, of the neighborhood and like just telling stories. So anytime there was a timeout and pick up basketball or something happened on the court or something happened at school, I was always the one that people would like, yo, come tell us about what happened. Because I always told the best stories.
That's man, like doing all the voices and like that. Like, yeah. I love it.
But it's funny because that became my role on a lot of teams. Like I became that guy, like in a huddle, I'd be like, oh, dang, like, who's your girlfriend with on the kissing cam? Like I would use that same joke from time to time, but I like definitely on the Patriots, my role was like, you know, not only to ball out, but like I was the comedic relief and for the coaches, for the equipment managers, for like the entire organization, which was like a very buttoned up organization. So my role became, you know, like, how can I lighten up the move and hear from time to time? And that was really cool.
Did they make you take all the Tom Brady supplements and the vitamins and all that stuff? The TB12?
Nah, I ain't take none of that shit. He be talking about being elastic and pliable and things like that. They just making up words and shit. But like,
He thinks he's Mr. Fantastic.
Tom is one of my favorite guys though. Like he's one of my favorite quarterbacks to play with.
I mean, longevity in any industry is tremendous, and he's had like 4 decades, 6 decades of quarterback. It's pretty incredible.
And the idea of him saying that the entire idea of his existence to be able to play so long is pliability, which is just being flexible, right? Like flexibility. And you think about your life in any job that you take, being flexible keeps you around much longer than anything else, right? If you have the ability to stretch your imagination, be flexible positions and roles and things like that, that keeps you in a job. And I thought that was really, when I think about pliability, I think about it as a human being, how pliable am I in whatever environment that I am? How flexible am I in this environment? How flexible is the way that I'm working with others or the people that I work with?
That's a really interesting point, actually. Have you found that your ability to adjust and be flexible has helped you in the last year with everything that's went on?
Oh, 100%, because my whole life has been adjusting. Like in football, like the entire game is about adjustments, right? Something doesn't go right. You hurt your ankle. You can't run the same way. You have to adjust the way you run. Like you have to adjust the way you play. Like you just always have to make adjustments. I live in a world where, if they did something right, you have to adjust to beat whatever it is that they're doing. And I do the same thing in life. I find that dealing with adversity on a large scale in front of millions of people, right? Every single Sunday, like it makes it a little bit easier for me to deal with adversity when it's just me and dealing with whatever I have to deal with. So yeah, because a lot of people don't experience adversity consistently. They have adverse situations that come up in their life from time to time. But like, how many people live in situations where they had to face adversity and, overcome the adversity every single day on a scale of where the outcome matters instantly? A lot of people right now facing adversity are people who probably haven't faced this type of adversity in a really, really long time. There's a whole class of people facing adversity right now that hasn't had to face adversity in quite some time. And they don't know how to deal with it. And like there's people, and then it's quite funny because to them, like wearing a mask is, people get up and complain about wearing a mask as being oppressed. I'm like, God damn, imagine that your form of oppression is someone telling you to wear a mask.
Yeah.
That's just really funny to me. It's like, oh, this is what you think being oppressed is? Like,
I don't want to delve too much into the political side of this, but yeah, the idea that people who have dealt with very little struggle in their life are really upset about wearing a 3x4 piece of fabric on their face because science says it's okay. There's an interesting parallel in a positive way about the people who wear masks and how it saves lives. And, a lot of the fictional characters that you and I are fans of as far as like comics and things of that nature, right? Like it's really interesting. Like their job was to put on a mask and go save lives. And this is literally everybody's chance now to be a real life superhero. You can literally walk out your house, put on a mask and save a life. Let's zoom out on that. And let's talk about some of the creative, like you have really, really excelled at combining creativity and diversity and beauty into one package with all of your art and your books. And I'm wondering, obviously the reaction for that, I would assume, has been like overwhelmingly positive, but has anybody ever come up to you and told you how the work that you're doing in these realms has just really impacted them and inspired them?
So my whole thing is escapism. I feel like a lot of the stories that are told about kids of color are stories that live right outside our door, right? We get Boys in the Hood. Like we don't get the Sandlot, we get Gridiron Gang. You know what I'm saying? Like you go to jail, then you play football. Like it's not really just kids being wizards or kids being magical. Kids of all colors love like the stuff I make, which is what I write for. Like I don't really write because there's a whole spectrum of blackness. There's kids who love comic books. There's Black kids who want to be scientists. There's Black kids who skateboard. There's Black kids who want to do magic. There's Black kids that, that want to live under the sea as mermaids. There's like this whole form of Black imagination that is left off by what people allow the stories to be told. and it forces them to grow up. They got to start thinking about racism at 9 or 10 or 11, like, why not just allow them to just excel at just being kids? And that's what my work is really about. It's like, how do I build worlds where kids can escape to these worlds to not have to deal with the realities? And when they go to these worlds, they're not treated as second-class citizens, because a lot of things that are created, if you're a Black kid, you're a second-class citizen in America, and you're a second-class citizen in most of these stories that are created, right? So how can you create worlds where you feel like you have ownership of that world, you belong to this world, and there's several versions of you. You can find yourself in these worlds, right? Because I do know Black kids who would be fit into Gridiron Gang. I went to school with some of them. But I also know Black kids who that would just be so frightening for them. The idea of going to juvenile to play, like that would be so frightening for them, so far left from where they are. You should be able to find yourself in these stories, right? Like, who do I like? You should be able to pick like, oh shit, I really like such and such because they have nunchucks, right? That should be the conversation you should be having. Or I really like, this character because, man, their style is dope. And plus, he has a sword, like that's just tight.
Right.
Like now, it shouldn't be like, I watch movies. I saw my first time I saw myself in a movie, was like 2 weeks ago, right? I watch movies all the time. In life. The first time I met a character in a movie that I felt like, yo, this is me, was like 2 weeks ago. It was this movie, Jingle Jangle.
Okay.
On Netflix. It's a musical, Christmas musical. Forrest Whitaker's in it. And I'm watching this movie. So one of my biggest inspirations in my entire life of creativity is Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I love Willy Wonka. I like the idea of having a chocolate factory. I like the idea of making something that everybody in the world wants. The boat that's riding on chocolate. Like, that's how I see myself. I like the idea of like walking with a cane and making everybody think that you're sick and then doing the front flip. I like everything about Willy Wonka.
I love that.
My question to myself is like, what is my chocolate? Right? So, but this movie comes out, Jingle Jangle, and it's this Black guy. And he's a toy maker. And he has this factory. It's really cool. He has this magic way of making things and seeing the world. And he has a daughter who is just as inventive and wants to be like her dad. So they're like, yo, that's me. And the wife is very supportive. So I'm like, yo, this is my family on television. That was my first time ever experiencing that. And I get excited because I don't really know. I know people tell me that, but I don't know what people really feel when they say that to me about my work. But now I know, like, dang, this is how people feel when they read my stories. Like, this is a really good feeling to have. So now it just made me increase my workload, because if this is the feeling that I'm delivering,
yeah,
I want to deliver as much of this feeling as possible to every single person because I love the way that felt.
I asked you earlier, like, how many, if you have 2 books coming out, and you wrote that number twice, you said 22.
Yes.
Let's talk about that, because that's based off the excitement and the exuberance of what you just said. Obviously, like, to pump out 22 pieces of content in any form is an incredible thing. To do 22 projects at the level of how you do it is a phenomenal feat. How do you manage all of that?
Well, thank you. So basically, like, the biggest thing I've been running into is like, all right, I don't want to do distribution anymore. As far as like, I don't want to be in Barnes and Noble. I don't want to sell my books on Amazon. I want to create a closed ecosystem. I want to do a subscription model. I want people to subscribe to the worlds I build. In order to do the subscription model, I have to be able to send them a book a month and have other things to offer them. So it's like, all right, so if we're going to do that, that means that we have to pump out at least 12 books a year.
Yeah.
Right. But you want to get ahead.
Right.
I'm my own publisher. I print my own stuff. And throughout that trial and error phase, I figured out a way to be able to print, be more vertical, where I could get a book done in 60 days to be ready to ship out, when it used to take me 18 to 22 months before books came out. So I want to be more consistent in my releasing of my work to build the worlds that I want to build, so people can spend as much time and escape to these worlds as much as possible. Because right now, if you order a book, most people order a book from Amazon, online, et cetera, et cetera. People don't really go to bookstores as much as they used to. So they order a book, and Amazon experience is a book comes to your front door in a brown box. You open it. You don't really think about where the book came from, who's shipping the book, or none of that stuff. It's not really an experience, right? You read the book. And then the thing that happens with most authors when you read a book is like you have to wait a couple of years before the next book comes out. So I started researching. I was like, yo, what if I built a subscription model and the ability to write as fast as I write now and to create. So I had to develop a visual language that allows me to create things faster. I didn't have a visual language. Over the last, I spent like 8 months developing this visual language, right? And now once I have the visual language developed, I could get things done faster because we do everything in the same style, and it doesn't cost me as much because we're working in a style that's already created. So it cuts down some costs. We played with pogs, we had yo-yos, we had these things, right? So how do I integrate a brand that's modern for today's kids, but also takes that nostalgia of the 90s where the parents want to share this experience with their kids? So I had to create a character that I felt like it was universal. Say like my book, Dear Black Boy. Dear Black Boy is like a super, super niche, right? Like it's not for everybody, right? It literally says Dear Black Boy in the title.
Right.
And it's usually for Black boys who have parents who think their kids should be interested in something more than just sports. So, all right, let's open up the floodgates. What can we create that's a universal character that I could translate in several different languages and several different places? That's when I came up with the new character for my stories, Super Cake Boy. And basically, Super Cake Boy is a version of myself, because if I was a hero, obviously I'd be cake, because cake is just delicious. And who doesn't like cake? So, I was studying Sonic the Hedgehog and how Sega had to create a mascot to be able to compete with Nintendo, Mario.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, I need to create a mascot, and then I could start shoveling in all the other stuff I want to do as well once I get everybody hooked on this large mascot. So I developed that, designing that. And then I was like, all right, cool. To keep with the ecosystem, I was like, if I can have a touch brand, because I do feel like after the pandemic is over, kids are going to want to play. Parents are going to want kids to touch things, get off devices, read books and things like that. So, all right, so we have the books. So then I was like, all right, what are our games going to be? So I started studying game design. And next year I have my first 2 games coming out, right?
Congrats.
Thank you. I'm super excited about those. And then after I start doing game design, it's like, all right, I've been doing animation. So what is animation like for me? And my big concept is I don't need to be on Nintendo, because the iPhone is a Game Boy for every single person that owns one. So how do I turn the iPhone into my Game Boy? And then if I want to develop a game, which I want people to play on the screen, I still don't need to be on Nintendo, Xbox, or whatever, because I could design it for Apple TV. Right. So you have your controller right there. So that eliminates several steps for me, right, in doing it this way. So what if I could create books that are more like cartoons? What if I could put a cartoon in a book, right, where you read it and it's just like, so it creates rereadability, this 45-minute to an hour and a half experience of reading where you can sit down in the afternoon and make your way through it and enjoy it. It's funny, it's engaging, like you could just jump in at any point and it feels like you're reading a cartoon. That's what I've been doing. And I'm working on a subscription model. So people would subscribe and basically I would send you a book a month, right? You'll get a book a month, but you could also get, you can also buy other books if you want to as well. But the covers, if you're part of the Venture Club, your books have a different cover as well. So now you get these collector's items that only people in the Adventure Club get. But if you want to buy the other covers that's open to the public, you can buy those as well. But the subscription model is that you get this book plus other pieces that are tied to the world that you get. So like now if I'm a kid and once a month, I'm waiting by the door. I want kids to be like, when that box, and what does that box look like? So when you see that box on your doorsteps, or if your parents brought it in and it's sitting on the kitchen table, you already know what it is.
Let's fast forward this out 5 years. What's the pie in the sky ultimate, success story for all of this? Where do you want to see this?
I keep having this dream ever since we decided to move back to Houston, in my hometown, where I bought Astroworld, which was our Six Flags. And basically, if I could rebuild Astroworld into my own theme park, with my characters, my own rides, and things like that. Like that would be really cool. So like that's part of it. Like theme park is kind of like part of what I want to do. But overall, I just want to build a place where people all want to spend time. Right. I want to build a world that people want to visit my worlds. Like, that everybody wants to go to the worlds I build. Like, I don't really want to be part of anyone else's infrastructure. I'm spending the time to build my own infrastructure, to make my own rules, to do things that I want to do my way, and to have this infrastructure where it's like I could build whatever I want to build.
Man, as we wrap up here, it's just like knowing you for a year or two or how long or wherever we have a great story. We met on the beach in Cannes sipping rosé. That's an amazing, that's a story for a different interview. But that's how I like to meet all my friends, like at 90 degrees, beautiful,
random. Hey, have a seat.
You want to have a seat? Would you like some rosé? And we just sit there. That's my point of entry for how I want my life to go from everything moving forward. But being serious, the imagination agency doesn't even do you justice, man. After hearing all the things you just said, it's that's as bold as that name is for a company and as dynamic as it is, it's actually underselling the level of what you're putting out there, man.
So that's why I'm launching a new company with this philosophy called, and my new company is called Browniversal.
Love it.
Because you're right. What you just said is exactly how I felt about the imagination agency. I felt like my ideas outgrew the studio.
I made it complimentary. It's a dope name, but I've never heard anybody with as much imagination as you. You're beyond imagination. You're it's next level shit.
That means a lot to me, man, because I think imagination is a serious thing.
Yo, thank you so much for finding time today. I know you got a lot going on with your fam and all your projects, and we're very honored and blessed to have you on here.
Thanks,
and make sure you guys all follow Marty on all his socials. We're going to tag them all and everything for all the music, all the books, his amazing family, super dad, all of that shit. It's a beautiful thing to see. That was it for another episode of The MICK Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please rate and subscribe to The MICK Show wherever you like to listen, and make sure to follow on Instagram @MICK and on Twitter @IamMick. Let me know who you want to hear on a future episode, and we will see you back here next week. The MICK Show is presented in partnership with Maxim. The show is produced by Lantigua Williams & Co. Jalika Lantigua Williams is our editor. Cedric Wilson is our producer and mixed this episode. Manuela Bedoya is our social media editor.